Monday with blessings, a cloud of rain, and that signifies blessings if you are a believer. But even if you're not, we've started Monday with some rain, and I can only imagine the traffic situation that we are going to encounter later on this morning. Well, good morning and welcome to Good Morning Uganda. I'm Olive Monica Najuma, here to serve you like we always do. We start your morning by giving you updates on everything and all things news that has happened over the last 24 hours, but also over the weekend. Now, speaking about the news that has gone on, the Speaker of Parliament, Honorable Anita Annette Among, has been unanimously elected Vice Chairperson of the Forum of African Speakers and Presidents of Legislatures, and this was during the second General Assembly of the Conference of the Speakers and Presidents of African Legislatures in Accra, Ghana. So well into the Speaker, and congratulations. And also still on matters news in the country, environmentalists have called for concerted efforts by the government and oil drilling companies to make deliberate efforts in restoring ecosystems affected during the ongoing infrastructure development in the Albertine Graben. Dr. Peter Babayenda from Environment for Development Initiative says this continues, or there continues, encroachment on wetlands and other ecosystems along the lake shores, and this has partly caused the increase in water levels being witnessed at Lake Albert and Lake Victoria. And still in the news on the local scene, over 2 billion shillings is required to construct a shelter to house persons diagnosed with cancer and ease access to health centers for those who come for medication. Uganda Women's Cancer Support Organization told the annual physical exercise aimed at addressing challenges faced by women with breast cancer. The annual dance workout exercise was spearheaded by Uganda Women's Cancer Support Organization in Kampala, and the exercise convenes cancer survivors to address the increasing cases of cancer through doing physical exercise. Now, speaking matters, the incident that occurred in Chigogwa, police are still holding 3 sets of feet at the Mlago mortuary, believed to be the remains of juveniles who were victims of the fuel tank explosion in Chigogwa. As you remember, the incident that occurred last week. These feet are thought to belong to 2 juveniles whose bodies were not recovered from the incident. 11 bodies have been handed over to their relatives following DNA analysis, and a total of 24 people have died in the incident while others remain hospitalized. Now, the police have yet to release a report on the cause of the fire, but preliminary investigations based on eyewitness accounts suggest that a nearby charcoal stove sparked the explosion. And now, away from Uganda, Israeli attacks have killed more than 50 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip in less than a day, most of them in the north of the enclave, which has been the scene of renewed Israeli ground offensive for the past 3 weeks, leading the chief of the United Nations to call the plight of civilians there unbearable. Now, moving on to the U.S. election, Donald Trump rallied thousands of supporters Sunday at New York's Madison Square Garden, aiming to energize his base in the Democratic stronghold. Opening speakers at the 20,000-seat venue drew cheers with criticism of rival Kamala Harris, Puerto Rico, and Latinos, making a fiery campaign push ahead of the election. Now, as he was starting his speech, Donald Trump said, and I quote, "I'd like to begin by asking a very simple question. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" Trump said at the start of his speech, and the crowd shouted no. Now, looking at events occurring in Sudan, a senior UN official in Sudan says she is deeply troubled by reports of atrocious crimes in the central Jizira state, including the mass killing of civilians by the paramilitary rapid support forces. Clementine Quenta Salami's comments came after an activist group said that at least 124 people were killed by the RSF attacks on villages over the past week. The RSF has denied targeting civilians, saying its fighters are clashing with militias armed by the military. And well, that wraps up all the news that we have been able to look at that has occurred over the last 24 and 48 hours. But now we have some bit of news coming in from the press, and Jerome Paul has that.
Well, into our press review this morning, President Museveni speaks out on the coffee bill according to what the New Vision is highlighting, and the president has warned against tribal talk on the proposed law. Then also Uganda economy to grow second fastest according to the latest from the International Monetary Fund. And in the same regard, Ireland gives 400 billion to Uganda. What is that for? Find the details in the New Vision. Then thousands stand up for Bukit Farmer Music Fete as Chigogwa fuel tanker death toll rises to 24. And then the other developments coming in from the Daily Monitor. Coffee bill boils hot, says the Daily Monitor. Brewing a storm, a remark by Speaker of Parliament Anita Among on the coffee bill vote has stirred debate, with farmers, leaders and the president all seeking to address tribalism undertones as they weigh the pros and cons of the law regulating the cash crop. And of course, in here, what the top leaders have said, one from the side of Buganda, the Katikiro, Charles Peter Maiga, then from the bit of the executive, what the president had to say, and on the side of the legislature, what the speaker has got to say on the ongoing coffee bill. And then new details show how government slept on job in Chitezi. And then healthy living, hope, stories of cancer survivors in today's Daily Monitor, as a Dubai farm takes digital deal from Nita Uganda's jaws, as Uganda takes lion's share of FDI within the region. Now, inside pact to end border wrangles with South Sudan, that is also with the Daily Monitor. Now, off to the Daily Nation is our turn to eat, says the Daily Nation. Conflict of interest. On January 5th, 2023, President William Ruto maintained that he was keen to form a state capture commission to end the culture of contracts going to public officials or the politically connected elite, which was a key campaign pledge. However, it has emerged that at least 8 Kenya Kwanza flagship projects are marred in controversy stemming from conflict of interest, some benefiting the president, his family directly. And then also push to make party hopping legal and easier. There is that report in the Daily Nation. Then the unlikely for steadying Ruto's ship. Also, in the matters devolution, why counties will wait longer for new revenue sharing formula. Then in crime, fresh details on East Layer murder suspect. That is also with the Daily Nation. Now, that brings us to the end of our press review this Monday.
You with the inspiration song of the day from Carol Komeza, Forever. We'll be right back.
Live from UPC Studios in Kampala.
Here to serve you like we always do. We start your morning by giving you updates on everything and all things news that has happened over the last 24 hours, but also over the weekend. Now, speaking about the news that has gone on, the Speaker of Parliament, Honorable Anita Among, has been unanimously elected Vice Chairperson of the Forum of African Speakers and Presidents of Legislatures, and this was during the second General Assembly of the Conference of the Speakers and Presidents of African Legislatures in Accra, Ghana. So well into the Speaker, and congratulations. And also still on matters news in the country, environmentalists have called for concerted efforts by the government and oil drilling companies to make deliberate efforts in restoring ecosystems affected during the ongoing infrastructure development in the Albertine Graben. Dr. Peter Babayenda from Environment for Development Initiative says this continues, or there continues, encroachment on wetlands and other ecosystems along the lake shores, and this has partly caused the increase in water levels being witnessed at Lake Albert and Lake Victoria. And still in the news on the local scene, over 2 billion shillings is required to construct a shelter to house persons diagnosed with cancer and ease access to health centers for those who come for medication. Uganda Women's Cancer Support Organization told the annual physical exercise aimed at addressing challenges faced by women with breast cancer. The annual dance workout exercise was spearheaded by Uganda Women's Cancer Support Organization in Kampala, and the exercise convenes cancer survivors to address the increasing cases of cancer through doing physical exercise. Now, speaking matters, the incident that occurred in Chigogwa, police are still holding 3 sets of feet at the Mlago mortuary, believed to be the remains of juveniles who were victims of the fuel tank explosion in Chigogwa. As you remember, the incident that occurred last week. These feet are thought to belong to 2 juveniles whose bodies were not recovered from the incident. 11 bodies have been handed over to their relatives following DNA analysis, and a total of 24 people have died in the incident while others remain hospitalized. Now, the police have yet to release a report on the cause of the fire, but preliminary investigations based on eyewitness accounts suggest that a nearby charcoal stove sparked the explosion. And now, away from Uganda, Israeli attacks have killed more than 50 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip in less than a day, most of them in the north of the enclave, which has been the scene of renewed Israeli ground offensive for the past 3 weeks, leading the chief of the United Nations to call the plight of civilians there unbearable. Now, moving on to the US election, Donald Trump rallied thousands of supporters Sunday at New York's Madison Square Garden, aiming to energize his base in the Democratic stronghold. Opening speakers at the 20,000-seat venue drew cheers with criticism of rival Kamala Harris, Puerto Rico, and Latinos, making a fiery campaign push ahead of the election. Now, as he was starting his speech, Donald Trump said, and I quote, "I'd like to begin by asking a very simple question. Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" Trump said at the start of his speech, and the crowd shouted, "No." Now, looking at events occurring in Sudan, a senior UN official in Sudan says she is deeply troubled by reports of atrocious crimes in the central Jizre state, including the mass killing of civilians by the paramilitary rapid support forces. Clementine Quenta Salami's comments came after an activist group said that at least 124 people were killed by the RSF attacks on villages over the past week. The RSF has denied targeting civilians, saying its fighters are clashing with militias armed by the military. And well, that wraps up all the news that we have been able to look at that has occurred over the last 24 and 48 hours. But now we have some bit of news coming in from the press, and Jerome Paul has that.
Well, into our press review this morning, President Museveni speaks out on the coffee bill according to what the New Vision is highlighting. and the president has warned against tribal talk on the proposed law. Then also Uganda economy to grow second fastest according to the latest from the International Monetary Fund. And in the same regard, Ireland gives 400 billion to Uganda. What is that for? Find the details in the new vision. Then thousands stand up for Bukit Farmer Music Fete as Chigogwa fuel tanker death toll rises to 24. And then the other developments coming in from the Daily Monitor. Coffee bill boils hot, says the Daily Monitor. Brewing a storm. A remark by Speaker of Parliament Anita Among on the coffee bill vote has stirred debate, with farmers, leaders and the president all seeking to address carrying a few jerry cans, others carrying a few bottles and buckets where they could easily get some fuel. Of course, because we know how much fuel costs currently,
yes,
anyone who could at least have a chance to get free fuel at that time, many thought this was the opportunity. That one, the vehicle was overturned, and of course, as many times as we've seen accidents in Uganda, many Ugandans love looting before they even save those that have been affected. And in this situation, many of the victims that are now counted as dead, however, not all of them, because others passed on simply because they were close to the explosion point. You do realize that in the incident there, the first thing many people were thinking about was to rush. Others were holding their phones to try and capture some few videos of content and everything. But of course, this was an accident, just like the many accidents that have been rocking the country in regards to fuel tankers. But what happened after, or the events that happened after, saw Ugandans rushing to the scene, which is something that we are not, which we really need to even have the conversation on, and thankfully we are going to, is that once it actually got involved in the accident, many people were rushing to the scene, not to save the driver or to even see what really led to the accident, but because they knew and they had it in their mind that, you know what, this is a fuel tanker, meaning there is going to be petrol spilling and we are going to go and take the fuel.
Now, it is reported that Uganda's daily fuel consumption is at about 6.5 million litres. And because of this, we now see a string of fuel tanks coming into the city or going to different parts of the country. Now, speaking of that, and looking at the many fueling stations we have in different places, I'll give you an example. If you're plying the route between Kawempe, Bwaise, going to northern Uganda, before you reach Kawanda, you're going to count so many petrol stations on that road. But also when you're traveling, especially outside of the country, let's say you're taking the route that takes you to Kenya, you're going to find many fuel tanks either coming to Uganda or going outside of Uganda. Now, we are a landlocked country, so whenever we are getting our fuel, it's normally coming from different countries. up until when we start drilling our own oil. But now the biggest question here, Joram, is what regulation gaps are there when it comes to the transport and storage of fuel in the country?
It's the safety measures. And before I even get into the safety measures, I've been looking at some of the incidents that have happened in the same kind of way. In August 2019, 19 people died when a fuel tanker barreled into other vehicles. That was in Chambura, that is in western Uganda, and it exploded. We had a similar incident in 2002. 70 people were killed when an oil tanker rammed into a bus. 2002. Yes, that is 50 kilometers from Chambura. Again, that is in western Uganda. Now, in 2013, there were 33 people who died in a blast after a fuel tanker overturned in Kampala. This death toll is rising to 24. And I'll be giving you more of the latest in regards to some similar accidents.
Yes, the incident that occurred in Lubigi not so long ago, how many Ugandans did we lose?
The
Was
one
it
of
also a fuel tank busting? What happened?
The one of Lubigi?
Yes.
No, I'll be getting into that
okay.
a little earlier, but a little later. But when we look into the inadequacies that you've mentioned, you look at one to do with our safety measures, where we are failing at as a country. And where do we fail in the safety measures is that when you look at how some of these accidents occur, one, the emergencies are delayed. The emergency teams are delayed in such a situation, because now this is a very kind of a critical situation where we find ourselves. That one, you're looking at where fuel stations are, and many of them are either close to households or close to where people do their daily businesses. And it's either welding, or it's either there's a kitchen somewhere, or it's a hotel somewhere, meaning by any chance it can lead to an explosion. Now it goes back to the safety measures, and the safety measures have to be met by the standard levels of the international market or the international world. That, you know, here is a fuel station. What is the proximity of the station to where people are, or where people are centered, or where people are settled? And this is where we are failing at as a country. That you are having close to 8 fuel stations in the same locality, and the distance between these fuel stations is not even far beyond. They are just close by. It's just a stone throw away. We have fuel stations in the country where you just cross the road to head to another fuel station. And then behind the fuel station, if you'll excuse me, behind the fuel station is a house of someone.
Yes.
Now, meaning if at all anything happens, the other person is going to be affected. And you know, the other incident in this situation takes you back to one of the fuel depots around Chambogo. Then many people have been questioning why we have that depot that is so close to the road. Close to the road, and behind it is a residential area. It's actually a suburb, having quite a number of Ugandans out there. Now, in such scenarios, you're asking yourself questions like, what if this comes up as a disaster that we've seen with the numerous explosions that we have? Now, on the issue of the safety measures, how we respond to emergencies is something that we are failing at. Then also, not so many of the people understand the magnitude of the risks associated when you're close to the fuel tankers that are in movement. And of course, this Chigogwa Inferno kind of puts us into a situation that we are failing as a country, that we are not having, we've not invested heavily in environmental protection as a country. And at the same time, we have failed to allow communities understand the risks attached to some of these incidents. That, for example, if at all you're living next to a fuel station, if this happens, even when any other normal accident happens, we have not at any moment as a country helped Ugandans to understand that once an accident occurs, you are not supposed to be in the perimeters of where the incident has occurred. But in most cases, we are seeing even, let's say, our police officers going full, you know, going closer to the scene even before they even
don't they do that to try and, you know,
no,
make sure
most
that
of them, even before the investigation teams,
the event is clear?
No, well, Olive, we have to understand that the police does not operate like any other body.
That's right.
That in the police, there is an investigatory directorate, meaning the others have to report directly to them. Now, the investigators have to come, put the marks that we normally see, do not cross, this is a crime scene, and do the investigation.
Yes.
But in most cases, you're seeing other police officers on the scene, you're seeing Ugandans on the scene, and they are not trying to help the situation. They're all trying to look and see what has really happened. Now, the question is, who is going to help? Exactly. So this is where we find ourselves in, that at the time the explosion occurs, it is going to take so many innocent people, because then there is no one who has any knowledge about dealing with such accidents.
Now, Jerome, as we come to the end of our conversation, I would like to ask, from the incidents that you've shared, there seems to be many fuel tankers overturning. So this brings us to a question. Is except for an incident that occurred in Lubigi, that was in 2021, where 33 people died at the Northern Bypass. This was because there was a fuel tanker that got involved in an accident with another car. But then the Chigogwa incident, this tanker just overturned, and many of them have also overturned. So could it be that they are filled to capacity? What are we missing that is leading to these incidents that in the end lead to loss of life?
I wouldn't say it's overfilling in any way. And if you've observed enough, most of these fuel tankers have one driver. They will never have two people inside.
Oh, not like the other trucks.
It is always one person. Whether he's driving from Mombasa to Kampala,
it's usually
it is one person. And I once asked why it is like that. And of course, someone once explained to me, and I would stand to be corrected in any way, but someone once explained to me that it's because they do not want to confuse the driver because of the fact that what he's driving or what he's carrying is, you know, is it can be used as a dangerous weapon at any one time, because once it explodes, people can die. Hundreds of people can die in an area. But when you look at the other situations that we are dealing with, I think there is something that we need to do when it comes to emergency preparedness as a country. That we need to have response and the capabilities to deal with some of these particular risk attached incidents. That you know that this is something that is going to cause death and destruction. You need to have emergency preparedness of any nature, that in every area and of course maybe in every district, I should say, we need to have at least a team that is geared towards emergency of such natures, not only normal accidents, but
also fires.
Exactly.
And Jeremy, it begs for the question: are local fire departments adequately trained? Do they have the resources they need?
No, many of them are adequately trained.
It is said it took about was it 3 hours for them to get response?
No, I think they are adequately trained, but now the issue we have is let's say the equipment that we have. Can it handle such, because you're looking at let's say the fire department headquarters here in Kampala. Now the question is, how close are they? You need to have this in every district, that at least you have a department, and in every district there is an office having the same facilities that the one in Kampala has. But then also, Olive, something to do with our infrastructure is something that is highly
road network.
Yes, the road network. You look at how narrow our roads are.
That's right.
And you're like, at any one moment, if at all a fuel tanker happens to get into an accident or knocks, then you have your fingers crossed, because you know at any one moment something is going to happen, something bad is going to happen.
Like in Chigogwa, for instance, there are houses that caught fire by just being next to the road.
Next to the road, and the road was too narrow. And many people have always said that if at all we have fuel tankers and let's say these particular trucks that carry goods, imported goods from the port of Mombasa into inland Kampala. Many have always been saying it is better we created a different road network for them. But of course, we do not have that capacity for now. But it's something that will be very important for us in such situations. Because if at all, fuel tankers and you have all these cargo trucks on the same routes, and it is the same reason that's why we have so much traffic on Ginger Road, because one, the roads are too narrow, and we have so many heavy trucks on the same road. Meaning if at all one truck gets into an accident, that's a full day disorganized for anyone who wants to beat the traffic.
All of it wasted. Meanwhile, there is a new road, speaking of Ginger Road, there is the Mayuge route. I don't know if you've used it. When you're going to Busia at Mosita, you take that turn. There are no fuel trucks, there are no heavy trucks.
No, but the distance now.
The distance is longer, but it is clearer. But I've realized that few Ugandans are using that road. Yet
because
it is very new and
because it's the
condition.
distance and of course the fuel cost and everything. And remember, many of these particular people have a time to beat, so they kind of think about it from the fact that I can't use that side. You can even think about people who use the main road hitting Mukono. Yet there is a Katosi Nkokonjeru road. But of course, every time you ask them, even those who don't want to use Kayunga, they will tell you there is a lot, it's a longer distance. So that is one thing that they actually use.
Be stuck in traffic. But Jerome, I would like to hear your parting shots regarding this, because this has happened. We have lost lives, and unfortunately, I can't say this will be the last incident. So you've shared on the safety measures, response is lacking, timely response. But I would like to hear your parting shots.
I think one is that there was some bit of human error as well in the incident of Chigogwa, which we need to also get back to ourselves. That whenever an accident happens as a Ugandan, you should not be thinking of going closer to the scene. Okay, it's always, you cannot control the emotions and the feelings one person has during the time. It may be your friend, it might be a family member who has been involved in this accident, but you find yourself rushing there. But I think the most important thing is to ensure that once such accidents occur, we need to report to the authorities. And of course, speaking of the authorities, I hope the authorities get to understand that we have seen quite a number of occurrences of this nature, and we are failing to rescue so many people. We are losing so many people in such situations that every fuel tank explosion, at least there is a number of people dying. At least the average number is always 20. Why are you losing 20 people in such a situation?
It's
that
like
can
we
be
are
avoidable.
not learning from previous
Yes, we are not
incidents.
learning. And the emergency services need to be brought closer to communities, closer to the people, and let people know how to deal with such errors or such incidents whenever they happen. That once it occurs, what do we need to do? Because it is something that is very difficult to deal with, but at least we need to know how best we can prepare ourselves for it. And you never know, at least we can, because it's an accident, it can soon happen again, but at least we can know how we can avoid the death of the Ugandans and property at the same time.
Well, thank you, Joram. Now, reports indicate that the death toll in the Chigogwa incident has reached 24, and over 15 bodies have been handed over to their families by the Uganda Police Force. So we'll be following this story, and we'll be giving you more details regarding the same as the investigations continue. Police has not yet found the cause of the fire, but eyewitnesses' accounts indicate that a nearby charcoal stove could have caused the fire. We'll know more, and we'll let you know more about this. But for now, we take a short break.
Live from UPC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda. In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Maskari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archive stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, every story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by
I'll call you every day, yeah, yo, baby, dondolo.
You can now get all the Chibuzi out with MTN voice bundles. Call all networks. Kubei Dondoro. Buy a 25-minute voice bundle for only 1,000, or buy any daily voice bundle of your choice. Dial *100*221# and select daily, or use the My MTN app. When we talk together, we are unstoppable.
Juko.
Yo.
Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Uganda, haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda.
Well, good morning and thank you very much for being part of it. And it's a chilly morning in and of course some heavy rains as well. Not as heavy as such, but of course when you look at our drainage systems in the capital, many are already filling up. So anyone who's trying to beat the traffic, it's high time you left home, because it is highly expected that we might have some early morning traffic this particular time. But that said, we are going to be starting off business outlets this morning from the Busoga sub-region, and some good, this is not some information and news coming in from the area, because the farmers in Busoga sub-region are facing economic hardships following a drastic drop in sugarcane prices from 250,000 to 50,000 Ugandan shillings per ton. Now, the unexpected price drop has exacerbated the already challenging living conditions of the outgrowers. And local community leaders appealed to the government intervention in order to stabilize the prices. Now, the significant price decline in sugarcane without a clear explanation from has left many outgrowers in Busoga sub-region struggling to make ends meet. Now, the farmers have failed to tell who determines the price of their produce. Currently, Busoga sub-region has over 50,000 sugarcane outgrowers employing more than 1 million people. And on the side of the millers, they claim that the surplus sugar in their stores has triggered the decline in sugarcane prices in the Busoga sub-region. Now, farmers want government to review the sugarcane bill to regulate sugarcane production in the country. They also want government to establish the Busoga Sugar Factory and to meet with the head of state to address their concerns. And of course, we shall be giving you more developments as they come along from that side of growers in the Busoga sub-region. And away from that, we turn our focus onto the Capital Markets Week as the State Minister of Finance, Henry Musasizi, commended Uganda's capital markets for promoting the saving culture among the working class Ugandans, but also wants the informal sector integrated into the financial market space. Now, these views were shared at the end of the World Investor Week organized by Uganda's Securities Exchange and the Capital Markets Authority in Kampala. Uganda's capital markets registered 4,000 daily users, recording a daily peak of 3,200 investors posting orders on the Uganda Securities Exchange platform. And the Uganda Securities Exchange currently has over 44,000 investors in the 18 listed companies. This increased uptake of capital markets and it is also significant in the sense that it increased confidence by investors in Uganda's economy. Now, in the same spirit, at the climax of this year's World Investor Week hosted in Kampala, the several stakeholders offered insights on how to leverage technology while investing. Now, capital markets channel savings from investors to business that require capital, growth and innovation. They also determine the value for securities through supply and demand, enhances market efficiency and investor confidence. Well, however, these huge concerns. Many Ugandans know how the Capital Markets Authority operates or how the capital market space runs. Apart from those in the formal sector, those in the informal sector feel like they are left behind. Well, lastly, from our business outlets this morning, drivers under the umbrella union of the National Union of Drivers, Cyclists and Allied Workers have called on government to promote road safety in the country. The leaders of buses, trucks and taxi drivers converged at the Teachers' House in Kampala on a fact-finding meeting to understand what causes drivers to cause road accidents. Buses and taxi drivers attribute the increased road car failure to bolster. The General Secretary, National Union of Drivers, Cyclists and Allied Workers, Moses Baleka, has revealed that road accidents can be reduced through tripartite responsibility with government. Now, the drivers say that government agencies, including the ministry workers, Uganda Police and workers, members of parliament, have failed to dialogue with them to find a solution to road carnage. Now, the State Minister the State Minister, Vice CT, in charge of national guidance, and Godfrey Baluku Kabyanga, dismissed the drivers' allegations. Now, the drivers say government failure to regulate the industry has led to influx of substandard spare parts on the market. However, they recommend the implementation of regular vehicle inspections and the maintenance checks. And well, that said, we now turn our focus onto the forex market to see how the Uganda shilling has been faring against other currencies on the exchange. The US dollar closed by the 25th of October at 3,660.05. That is for those buying, while selling closed at 3,600.05 shillings. The Great Britain pound buying at 4,745.62, while selling was 4,758.59. The euro was buying at 3,960.91, while selling at 3,971.73. The Kenyan shilling buying 28.37, selling 5. The Tanzanian shilling buying 1.34 shillings while selling at 1.35. The South African rand buying was 206.95 while selling 207.51. That's it for business this Monday morning, and we now turn our focus onto the updates coming in from the US elections 2024. Here's the USA election update for 2024 as the United States will be heading to the polls come next month. Now, starting off from the side of Donald Trump's campaigning side, the Trump's Madison Square Garden rally was marked by racist slurs as coerced insults and dangerous threats about immigrants. Now, the businessman and former president Donald Trump has been accused of coming up with racist comments. Now, according to another businessman in Grant Cardone, revealed that Harris and her pimp handlers will destroy our country, while Tucker Carlson mocked Harris's racial background as the country, where Tucker Carlson said that as the first Samoan Malaysian low IQ former California prosecutor to ever be elected president, no, she's not impressive. Now, wrestler Hulk Hogan and Dr. Phil McGraw and a rare surprise appearance from Melania Trump also garnered cheers from the 20,000 attenders. Now, Trump promised to introduce a new tax credit for family caregivers and doubled down on his anti-immigration rhetoric. He said his administration would pursue the death penalty for migrants who kill Americans and that he would evoke the Alien Enemies Act of 1978. Now, Trump's running mate J.D. Vance avoided calling Russia an enemy in an interview to meet the press. Vance said Russian President Vladimir Putin was clearly an adversary, but they do not have to be smart about diplomacy. Now, the Chinese state-affiliated hackers intercepted the audio from the phone calls of U.S. political figures, including an unnamed campaign advisor of Donald Trump. The Washington Post reported that yesterday, as various media outlets reported on Friday that Trump campaign was made aware last week that the Republican presidential candidate and his running mate, J.D. Vance, were among a number of people inside and outside the government whose phone numbers were targeted through the infiltration of the Verizon phone systems. Now, besides that, Puerto Rican stars Buddy Bunny and Ricky Martin back Kamala Harris after racist comments at the Trump rally. Now, these particular stars, Bad Bunny and Rick Martin, have thrown their support behind Kamala Harrison the same day that a comedian appearing at Donald Trump's rally at Madison Square Garden called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage. Now, on Sunday, international reggaeton star, whose official name is Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, shared a video of the Democratic presidential nominee to his more than 45 million followers on Instagram. His support could be a boost for Harris' campaign as it tries to bolster its support with Latino and Puerto Rican voters. And lastly, from further developments of the same U.S. presidential election updates, the other updates coming in show that Michelle Obama gets personal and Trump courts Muslim voters. The former First Lady expressed frustration at an easy ride given to Donald Trump, while Kamala Harris is continuously expected to dazzle. Now, Trump promises peace in the Middle East, but at the same time, Michelle Obama says no. And Michelle Obama came out and said in terms of her personal terms on Saturday, saying that Michigan should not allow Donald Trump to beat Kamala Harris, and the fact that Kamala Harris has been held to a higher standard than her opponent is something that Michelle Obama says is quite unfair. And at the same time, she was citing Donald Trump's handling of the COVID-19 pandemic and his efforts to cling to power after losing the 2020 election. She was quoted saying, "I hope you'll forgive me if I'm a little frustrated that some of us are choosing to ignore Donald Trump's gross incompetence, and at the same time, while asking Kamala to dazzle us at every turn." This is a statement from Michelle Obama. It marks a significant change in tack for Obama, who inspired Democrats with the slogan, "When they go low, we go higher when Hillary Clinton was running against Trump. Now, Saturday was the first day that that early in-person voting became available across Michigan. More than 1.4 million ballots have already been submitted, representing 20% of registered voters. Now, in that same spirit, Donald Trump said he deserved the support of Muslim voters because he would end conflicts and bring peace to the Middle East. Well, more developments will be coming along here on Good Morning Uganda in regards to the preparedness of the U.S. ahead of their polls for 2024. Will it be Kamala Harris or will it be Donald Trump? That is one that we'll be leaving up to you to wait in the same spirit as we're waiting. But ours is to ensure that we give you those updates as they come along from both camps and from the different campaigning managers of the two presidential candidates in the U.S. Well, that does it for the updates this morning. Coming up is the Good Morning Uganda agenda. Stick around. This is GMU.
Live from UPC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by
I call you every day, yeah, yo, baby, don't know.
You can now get all the Chibuzi out with MTN voice bundles. Call all networks. Kubei Dondoro. Buy a 25-minute voice bundle for only 1,000 or buy any daily voice bundle of your choice. Dial *100 *21 hash and select daily or use the My MTN app. When we talk together, we are unstoppable.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archived stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, every story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Juko.
Yo.
Wachikuwa. Check the shopping, man. What's your secret?
Uganda wange, haven't you heard of the parish development model PDM?
Yes, I did, but I thought it was just a talk.
No, Sebatia. It is real. I and a few friends together formed a circle, accessed money from the PDM, invested in a portrait project, and now things are moving.
Juko. I thought I was one of your friends.
You are.
But you left me behind.
I didn't leave you in poverty. What you do, just visit your LC2 chairperson and your parish chief and start the process of economic transformation. Just like that. The parish development model is an initiative from the government of Uganda through the Ministry of Local Government designed to transform all lives of Ugandans for the better. PDM, my parish, my development, my life.
A new dawn on Behind the Headlines with me, Timothy Nyangweso. Every Wednesday, live in our studios in the heart of Kampala. We have conversations that have analysis, explanation, but not every truth is fact, and not every fact is truth. Every Wednesday, 10 p.m. on your public broadcaster.
All on your public broadcaster,
UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda.
Well, it is time for our agenda segment. Good morning. I'm Olive Monica Najuma. If you're just joining us, welcome. This is Good Morning Uganda, where we have the conversations that matter with the policymakers and opinion leaders in our nation. And today I'll be speaking to Ambassador Henry Maiga about Uganda's refugee policy. You see, Uganda hosts currently we are hosting about 1.7 million refugees, and this puts us at number one in Africa as the largest refugee hosts, and also sixth in the world. Now, when you look at that, you also wonder, where are the refugees coming from? Majority of them are coming from South Sudan, Democratic Republic of Congo, and other countries bordering Uganda within the East African region. Now, we have always prided ourselves in the fact that we are good hosts. We have a free refugee policy. We are welcoming. But now we have been hearing messages and conversations from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs saying that they are grappling with these numbers. There are challenges that the government is currently facing regarding Uganda's refugee situation. So that brings us into our conversation for today. We want to look at, yes, what are the demerits and merits in hosting these many people into our country? How is this affecting Ugandans? And also, how is the welfare of refugees within the country? What are some of the highlights that Uganda's refugee policy has put across? But also, how has it been detrimental to Ugandans themselves who are living side by side with the refugees in the country? And the ambassador will be able to highlight some of these things and also to walk us through the policy so that we have a proper understanding of it. Good morning and welcome.
Good morning, and thank you very much for this opportunity once again for us to be talking about something that affects our country.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, and I like how you've put it, something that is affecting our country, because it is one thing for us to be hospitable, to have an open door refugee policy, but also it's important for us to look at how this is affecting our country. And that's where we will start. When you look at the refugee policy in Uganda, Ambassador, refugees, I'll start with some of the givings or the positives of the policy. Refugees in Uganda are allowed to have land, to run businesses. But how is this affecting the country at large, especially in the refugee hosting communities?
That's right, but of course the first point which I want to make is about where we are coming from as a country in terms of management of the refugee crisis in the region. Because when you look at the time, for instance, before 1986 or before the Yoweri Museveni administration, who were contributors of refugees into the region, and even in the beyond. People would go to Europe, depending on how much education they had, they would go to the Americas and so on and so forth. And that was the situation then, before 1986. We were churning out refugees to other places as a country. And that was because of the insecurities that we had. Now, after the advent of the Yoweri Museveni administration, of course, things changed in such a way that we now became a more stable country. We now became a more accommodative country. And so in the region, we became a very stable country. And therefore, when other places or other countries got into political turmoil and sometimes taking dimensions of becoming military conflicts, people began coming to Uganda from all over the place, like you have mentioned, from the DRC, from the Somalia, from Southern Sudan, from Sudan itself, from Rwanda, Burundi, and so many other places, including Afghanistan, by the way. And many people don't mention that one because when the Americans pulled out of that place, a number of Afghans were brought here as
That's
refugees.
right.
And so we've been accommodating various nationalities in terms of our refugee policy management. And I think that is really something which has been very positive about our country in terms of us accepting others to come and take refuge in our country because of the political stability and the rest of the things that do exist here. And so the spirit that the Yoweri Museveni administration has had in as far as helping the refugees, especially from the region, from the African continent, is in line with Pan-Africanism. That look, if your neighbor is in trouble, then you have to bring them on board. But of course that has far-reaching, should I call them ramifications, because it would require a lot of resources to look after these people and so on, and therefore that brings us into focus. And that brings the comments, the statement which was made by the president, namely that the partners in the management of refugees in our country have to make sure that they meet their commitments, especially financial commitments, because looking after these refugees means that you have to spend resources. And for quite a bit of time, many countries, many international organizations have actually been funding the refugee management crisis. But of recent, because the crises have become so many all over the place, not only in Africa, you can talk about Southern Sudan, you can talk about Sudan, you can talk about Somalia, you can talk about Eritrea and so many other places. But refugees have been moving into Europe, for instance. And the UK recently, you remember, was planning to repatriate quite a number to Rwanda. And I've heard also Hungary is actually planning to repatriate refugees into Chad. And these are some of the things which we can't isolate from our own refugee management policy. And therefore that means that there must be resources that we must expend on the refugees. And if partners pull out, or if partners are not meeting their financial obligations and commitments in as far as managing the refugee crisis, then it means that the management of this problem is going to be in trouble. But of course, once the refugees are welcomed in this country, like quite a number of the refugee policy of Uganda is one of the best, if not the best internationally.
What makes it unique from others?
Absolutely. It is so unique because unlike in so many other places where people are put in camps as refugees and they're not allowed, for instance, to involve in commercial activity or economic activity, in Uganda we allow them. That they can do business, they can till the land, they can access education and health services, they can do all sorts of things in order for them to make sure that their well-being is being supported as much as they can. That makes the refugee policy of this country, of Uganda, very, very unique and different from the rest of the refugee policies in other places, where if you become a refugee, you become completely helpless, because you only wait for stipends to be given to you, you wait for food rations to be given to you, you don't move out of the camp. There is free movement in this country, and as far as the refugee policy is concerned, refugees can move out of the camp, they can build small houses, they can access education, as I've said before, they can access health services, they can go to school, they can till the land, they can open businesses. It is absolutely unique in this country and as far as the management of the refugee crisis is concerned. And therefore, this welcoming spirit in Uganda is in line with what the president has been talking about, which is Pan-Africanism, because most of the, as I've said before, most of the refugees are coming from other African countries. And we are obligated as one of the member states of the AU to make sure that we look after these people. And therefore, our policy is extremely, very, very different from other policies from other places because of this accommodative spirit.
Okay, so now that brings me to the next question. Yes, our policy is very accommodative, like you've mentioned. Refugees are allowed to move freely in the country. They're allowed to operate businesses. They're allowed to, they have a right to education within the country. But then one wonders, how is this impacting the local hosting refugee communities?
Absolutely. I wouldn't want to amplify that as much.
You wouldn't? But yeah, Ugandans are starting to whisper, and the whispers are becoming louder and louder.
Because then the argument becomes one-sided.
Okay.
Of course, that there is strain on resources, local resources, especially in terms of land.
Yes.
If you're going to allow these people, of course, to cultivate, it means that they're encroaching, especially in places where there is communal ownership of land, the land tenure system, which is communal. Therefore, some people are going to be alarmed, and of course, there will be a strain on the health sector, a strain on the education sector, a strain on quite a number of other resources that would otherwise have been exclusively enjoyed by Ugandans. But I wouldn't want, in my view, to really emphasize that one, because there are also other opportunities, intrinsic opportunities, that many people may not be looking at. That once, and if there is substantial funding to the refugee crisis in the country, it means that small towns are going to grow. And you know what comes out of that one? It means that the people, the nationals that are probably selling food items would have a market where to sell these things to the refugees. And the local economy, in my view, as a result, would be boosted. And that would mean economic development. And satellite states, cities would develop as a result of these small economies that come as a result of these refugee settlements. And so there are quite a number of other things, because that local economy, in my view, is extremely important, because once the refugees have a capacity to buy the food items and the rest of the items, it means that the local economy is doing very well. I really want really to emphasize the negatives as far as welcoming refugees in this country, because in any case, the president has been spot on by talking about Pan-Africanism, helping other Africans who are in crisis. We are obligated, we have an obligation, a moral obligation, in fact, to make sure that we help these people who the Baganda would call ababunda. It's extremely important. You just can't leave them to be consumed in conflict. We have to make it an obligation for the country to look after these people. And as a result of these refugee settlements, there are quite a number of benefits that accrue in as far as the local economy is concerned, and so on and so forth. Okay,
Ambassador, you make a pertinent argument there, but I'd like to take your focus a bit to the events that recently occurred in the UK, where the locals or the nationals were arguing that immigrants are taking over space that is supposed to be theirs, be it in education, be it in business, and even taking their jobs. That is normally the argument of locals in different countries, that immigrants, or in our case refugees, are taking up space. I'll give you an example. In Uganda right now, in the cities of Uganda right now, let's look at Kampala. Drive through Gaba Road. As you go to Munyonyo, that side, you're going to find that we have a nation within a nation of sorts, with Eritrean businesses springing up, not bad for the economy, but there is the argument by Ugandans that these people are outshining us too much. What would you say about that?
Of course, as I've said before, and let me be categorical about these things, there will be that level of discomfort. There is no doubt about it, because I'm aware that the Eritreans and the Ethiopians who are actually residing in that part of Kampala city are taking over the, for instance, the housing sector, because they have money to pay for their houses, accommodation, and so on and so forth. But that's one side of the story. The other side is that these people are actually supporting the local economy in that part of the world, in that part of the city, because they are spending money.
Yes.
And so it brings us to the question as to who is complaining about the presence of these individuals in that part of the city. Who is complaining and who is not complaining? Because there are two arguments. One of them is that, of course, the nationals who feel that they are being displaced by non-nationals in terms of accommodation, yes, are complaining. But what about the landlord who is actually earning income? Because these people are not living in those houses for free.
The landlord is earning income, but then it makes it harder for Ugandans to have the same good quality housing in those areas because of the refugees.
Yeah, because I have relatives actually who live in that part of the city, and they have had to shift to other places. But other places have actually cheaper even housing. They have cheaper housing.
The houses are as good quality.
They are as good, and in fact even more spacious than... of course, there is that little discomfort which people are talking about. That look, once you get displaced from a locality where you've been used or where you've been living for quite a number of years, and then you relocate to another one, there is that level of discomfort which normally comes as a result. But the fact of the matter is that even if that is happening, there are other benefits. That discomfort definitely is a negative. There's no doubt about it. And of course, in that part of the city, it has become extremely difficult. Accommodation rates have become extremely expensive. But then there are alternatives because nobody is sleeping on the streets. They are finding other places where actual apartments are getting constructed. And in my view, the important point that one has to emphasize here is that the economy, especially the local economy, is being supported by these people who are living in those units. And once they are paying the landlords are definitely going to reinvest those funds into other projects which are then going to employ Ugandans. For me, it's a question of us looking at these issues, and then we look at the merits and demerits of each one of the two sides. That yes, there is that discomfort. People are getting displaced. They are finding it extremely difficult to pay for accommodation in Gaba and the surrounding areas because of non-nationals taking over these houses. Fine, there is always that discomfort. But I have not seen that people, after failing to pay for accommodation in those parts of the world, they are
homeless.
They don't have alternatives where they can stay, or homeless, so they are living on the streets. They are finding other places where actually accommodation is even cheaper and more spacious. There's always that little discomfort of shifting from one place where you are used. But then there are alternatives where these people can stay. So for me, I just want to argue it that way, that look, yes, there is that negative that people are being displaced. Nationals cannot afford probably to live in these parts of the city, but there are alternatives. But on the other hand, the non-nationals that are taking over these accommodation units are actually paying money, and that money is being recouped into the economy, and it means that it is going to be reinvested in the economy, and then the housing sector is going to boom, and it is going to expand, and there will be alternatives where people can shift.
Okay. Well, we are trying to understand Uganda's refugee policy, and I'm having this conversation with Ambassador Henry Maiga. Now, if you have any queries or comments regarding this subject, you can reach us through WhatsApp number 0709 602 592. You can also send a direct text message. Now, please, as you send your messages, leave your name and where you are texting from, and I will be able to share your views with the ambassador as the program continues. Now, Ambassador, we have seen that the numbers have grown. We have about 1.7 million refugees in the country. We have about 100,000 refugees in the suburbs or in the cities of Uganda, and actually 100,000 living within Kampala metropolitan. So with that number and with the emergence of the COVID-19 pandemic, development partners, some pulled out, others reduced the support that they were giving to us in order to take care of the refugees. So how, among these challenges, how is the government coping?
Of course, I've seen the president making a statement about the reduction in funding to the refugee sector. I've also seen the minister who is responsible for the refugee sector, Honorable Hilary Onek, commenting about the reduction in the funding. And of course, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, it's extremely important that that funding continues so that people can look. In any case, when you look at the causes of these conflicts, it's not us as Uganda who are causing them. It is the geopolitics and international politics that normally cause these conflicts. And therefore, if the international politics, the global politics and the geopolitics are the ones which are churning out these refugees, and at the end of the day, these refugees are coming to Uganda, it should be an obligation by those who are causing this problem actually to fund the refugee sector. Because if they don't, or to put it differently, if they didn't want to fund these refugee problems, then they shouldn't be causing these things. Because you see, there are so many political dimensions, especially international political dimensions, when it comes to the conflicts that we have in the region, whether it is Southern Sudan, whether it is Somalia, whether it is Sudan itself proper, and so on and so forth. The international dynamics always come into play. And there are so many players who are causing those things to happen, those insecurities to happen in those countries. And at the end of the day, Uganda becomes a net recipient of refugees from other places where we have not had a hand at all in as far as those insecurities are concerned. And therefore, that makes the obligation has to be placed squarely on those who are causing these conflicts. But there is also a moral aspect that, look, as the international community, for us, we provide the space as a country where these people can be safely accommodated, and others should also play their part, especially if they have made commitments to fund the refugee sector. But pulling out in the middle, when we were already stuck with these numbers, 1.7 as you say, and then the partners, the funding partners pull out, it means that this country definitely is going to find problems in as far as managing the refugee sector is concerned, and can also have far-reaching consequences, including insecurity. Because the refugee sector, if it's not funded properly, these people are going to be tempted to become criminals in a country, foreign land, and that will cause more problems. And at one point, God forbid, probably Uganda may begin to consider expelling the refugees to return them to the places where they came from. But that's not what I'm sure my government would want to do. They want to accommodate these people as much as they can, and therefore those who have been funding and I'm sure they have the resources, except that probably they are finding other commitments. There is a crisis, for instance, because much of that money has been coming from Europe. There is a crisis in Ukraine, and everybody seems to be sucked into that conflict. And so they're spending lots of money. Probably they don't find enough that they can send to a country in as far as the refugee sector is concerned. But the obligation is there, the moral obligation is there. We are part of the international community, and our obligation, in as far as we are concerned, is to make sure that we provide the space where these people can be accommodated, and others should put in that, basket of money, whatever they can, so that these people are looked after as much as we can.
How about the countries that are contributing to the refugee problem? Now, for instance, here we have many refugees coming from the Sudan, from South Sudan, from DRC, from Somalia, to mention but a few. Can't they also be held responsible in terms of contributing to the welfare of their people in the hosting country?
Of course, that now becomes so dicey. Of now apportioning blame as to who is to blame for causing these conflicts.
Well, someone has to take the fall.
Absolutely, they have to take. I mean, each one of these countries where the conflicts exist has to take the responsibility to make sure that they bring peace to their respective countries, so that they don't churn out refugees. Because the moment you do, it is also part of the you're actually causing yourself insecurity. I can give an example that when the Yoweri Museveni administration came in 1986, one of the most commendable things they did, because we had refugees across. We had refugees in the DRC, especially in the northeastern part of the DRC. We had refugees in southern Sudan. We had refugees from Europe. I mean, in Europe, Ugandan refugees for that matter, all over the place. But what the President Yoweri Museveni did was to make sure that these people return to the country. Some of them, yes, they had been involved in this and that in terms of criminality, but they were given amnesty. And that was very strategic.
So what you're saying is for the countries that contribute to the refugee problem should ensure that there is peace in their countries so that their people can come back home.
Absolutely. That's what I was trying to actually elaborate on. That one of the first things that the Yoweri Museveni administration did after they took power in 1986, they knew that refugees across the borders, Ugandan refugees staying outside the boundaries of this country, can actually become a source of insecurity. And so it was done in such a way that these refugees are brought back into the country so that they don't become a source of insecurity. So the same, in my view, should apply to the rest of these countries, neighbors of ours, to make sure that the refugees, to stabilize, first of all, their countries, because nobody is going to come back to a country which is unstable. So the stability must be established. And how they establish them, I don't know. But President Yoweri Museveni stabilized this country because it was once really becoming a pariah state because of the insecurities that did exist. So once the peace was re-established, then the administration, the Yoweri Museveni administration, had to take it upon itself to make sure that these people are returned to the country and settle down and forget about conflicting. Because once the conflicts continue, they will become, and especially if some people, and especially armed groups, because we had armed groups. Yeah, we as a country, before President Yoweri Museveni took government. But once he took government, many people ran out of the country with guns, and so these people had to be enticed, in whatever form, to come back to their country, put down the arms and get integrated into the normal human life.
I
Extremely
see.
important for the rest of the countries.
Yes,
Stabilize your
yes.
countries and make sure that you don't churn out refugees. Because the moment you do, they become a source of insecurity.
Yeah, and you're right. I mean, when we look at our politics as Uganda, and you've hinted on it, some of the people that converged and formed a force that came and actually threw out, for instance, Idi Amin, were refugees in other countries, Ugandans that were now refugees. And when you look at the case of Rwanda, the same thing happened, because the refugees converged and then they had to go back home and then ousted a government. So if you do not bring peace home, you're going to create a problem. I see where you're coming from. Well, you can join the conversation. We are understanding the refugee policy, Uganda's refugee policy, and I'm speaking to Ambassador Henry Maiga, who is helping us understand, and he's also highlighting why it is important for us to be a hosting community for refugees, but also he's also looking at some of the problems that would happen if the countries that are contributing to the refugee problem that we are now facing in the country do not find solutions or bring peace into their own countries. You can join the conversation through WhatsApp number 0709602592. Now, Ambassador, in as much as it is moral, it is the moral thing for us to do, to host, and it is Pan-Africanist for us to host refugees. How has this influx affected resources, including healthcare, education, infrastructure?
Of course, if the funding was adequate from the partner states and partner organizations that have been funding, we must commend them for doing that for so many years. Because, I mean, people have been coming, I don't know for how many decades. And so we must commend those who have been funding this refugee sector. But a cessation of the funding has far-reaching consequences, not only for our country, but also for the countries where these people are coming from, and also for the international community. Because once this problem is allowed to fester, then handling it will become even harder.
Yes.
And so it has to be sorted, the funding has to come, and the one way of doing that is by making sure that whatever little each one of these partner states and organizations can put into the collective basket in order for us to manage the sector as much as we can.
Are there
so
specific
but
areas?
Of course the strain is, I agree with the argument that once that funding, because if the funding is realized, then the question of strain on, for instance, the education sector, or the strain on the health sector, the strain on the land, the strain on quite a number of other things that come into stress in as far as the presence of the refugees in this country is concerned. That stress can be really so mind-boggling. And therefore, one way of doing it is by, of solving it is by ensuring that the funding continues to come.
Okay. And I actually wanted to ask still regarding funding, if there are any specific areas where funding shortfalls are impacting the well-being of the refugees and the hosting communities.
I saw a representative of the United Nations refugee arm of the UN. He visited, for instance, one of the camps in Western Uganda, and he was saying that, look, the funding must come, otherwise education sector is going to suffer, not only for the refugees, but also the local community, because these people sometimes are going to the same schools, and so they have to share the space, they have to share the resources, they have to have the same teachers, they have to have all sorts of things. And once it comes to the health sector, the same is very true, because you're sharing the medical facilities, you're sharing the medical professions, you're sharing the rest of the facilities, as you may want to look at them, including sanitary, including sanitary facilities. So it becomes extremely difficult for these things to be enough for both the nationals and the non-nationals.
Yes.
In that case, for the nationals and the refugees. So you can see that there are far-reaching consequences if the funding does not come. And therefore, he was also the UN chief, who is in charge of the refugee sector globally, was also talking about the need for the funding to be stepped up so that this sector can be looked after in a better and more organized way in order to stop the strain on the local resources in the various places where these camps of refugees do exist. Yeah.
Okay. Now we have a few views that are coming through, and Joseph Lubega says, thanks for the presentation. He's watching from Lumumba. And I have another one coming in from Muhimbira Benon from Mitoma district, and he's though watching from Arua city. He says, I don't have any problem with raising cost of living as per housing sector is concerned, so long as they are paying. Let whoever can't manage look for where he or she can fit. But my question, what are the privileges for refugees over nationals, over the citizens, as if they are respected much by the government over citizens? Because I have ever seen where refugees fight citizens, destroy their gardens, and whenever complaints are raised, no serious response to citizens. Should we think refugees deserve better treatment than citizens, however much they should be protected? I think he says, should we say that refugees are better, are treated better, or are observed to be more of their rights are observed to be heavier than those of the nationals because the government is protecting them? I'm trying to paraphrase here, and I'll leave that question to you, Ambassador.
Absolutely, extremely worth a question, because the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda is very clear. It says there is no naturalization for, that can be granted to a refugee. We cannot, in other words, we can't become equal. Absolutely not. It can't happen. The Constitution is very clear, and if somebody wants, they can go and read the Constitution. There are portions in the Constitution that do emphasize that. And therefore, if that naturalization of refugee cannot happen, it bestows on us as nationals special rights. And therefore, the rights, yes, of the refugees do exist, but ours are supreme, and they are guarded or protected by the Constitution. Extremely clear in the Constitution. And therefore, but at the same time, as I said at the beginning of this conversation, there are obligations that we do have, especially in the spirit of Pan-Africanism, to look after these people, because they've got estranged from their respective countries, and therefore when they run into our borders, we have to accommodate these people. We have to accommodate these people, but of course, like we normally say when people are getting married, we always get into these marriages with our baggages. The wife is coming from a totally different extraction, the husband the same, and they are coming with two different behaviors, because the extractions are different, and you expect that there will be those divergences between these two individuals. So it applies also to the refugees and we nationals, that when the non-nationals, the refugees for that matter, come into our country, they must respect the law. They must not violate the law, and they must ensure that they keep the law to the latter. Extremely important. And therefore, when somebody talks about favoritism, yes, fine. I think there is that level of concern that probably sometimes it looks as if, but not confirmed.
Is this smoke coming without any fire whatsoever?
I don't know, because people have to quote the exact incidences where this has happened. But at least, as far as I'm concerned, the Constitution is very clear. The national has rights, and those cannot be violated. But also the refugee has got rights, but the Constitution says that this person does not become a citizen, even when he is given a wide latitude of kinds of things that we mentioned at the beginning of this conversation, that they can do cultivation, access to education, access to health. That does not make them nationals of this country.
So they cannot hold Ugandan passports?
No, they can't hold.
They can't hold. Do they vote?
No, they don't vote. They're not supposed to vote according to the law.
To the
you can't
Constitution.
vote. Just like I can't vote in the US, they're going for elections. If I went to visit, I can't vote in their elections. But the best I can do is only to observe. The same story with the refugees. And if a refugee is found voting, then that becomes criminal. And the law can take its course. There is absolutely no doubt about that. So the Constitution is very clear. It protects us as nationals against.
Well, another comment comes in from Wambale Enos in Kasanda town, and he says, thanks for the topic about refugee management in Uganda. It's not bad for Uganda to host refugees. Big up to the president and management. Hands that give are the hands that receive. Success to all refugees in school and Ugandans who have loved and provided for them. All right. Thank you, Enos. And now I have another comment coming in from Samuel Omoding from Busia, who has two questions for you, Ambassador. He says, why is it that these refugees have gotten good care than the Ugandans themselves, who are the inhabitants of the land? And the next question is, does it mean that without these refugees, Uganda is not liable to the outside funding in terms of taking care of its own people? Ambassador, don't you think this in a long run is going to ruin our land ownership, resources and political stand of the country? That is from Samuel Omoding from Busia.
Funding, I'll start with the latter. Funding of refugees and funding for nations. But of course, it's a very interesting question.
Yeah.
The funding which partner states and partner organizations are doing, and as far as the refugee sector, cannot be compared with the funding, for instance, which we are securing from the loan giving or grant giving organizations like IMF and World Bank and so on and so forth, and even sometimes grants from individual states that are friends to us. That funding is not anywhere in the region of what the small amounts of money that are put forward for the refugee sector. It's not anywhere. So, in as far as that funding is concerned, if we are talking about funding, although for me I'm not a fan of funding, especially loans from the international organizations, because loans don't develop us. What develops us is something else. So, the funding, yes, if somebody is talking about funding, yes, it's coming from IMF, it's coming from World Bank, it's coming from China, it's coming from individual states, for instance, in Europe, and even the Americans are putting a lot of money in the health sector, which are huge amounts of money as compared to the small amounts of money which are given to the refugee sector. So as far as funding, yes, the refugees are being funded by partner states and partner organizations, but much of the bigger money is being given to the country in terms of loans and grants and so on and so forth. For me, that definitely settles the argument as to whether the preference in terms of funding is given to the refugees and not us. Actually, the bigger funding is given to us rather than to the refugees, because what is given to the refugees is much, much smaller compared to what the other question. I didn't get it very well. The first one.
The other question, he was, I think it's the question you had already answered from the previous comment. He says, why is it that refugees have gotten good care than the Ugandans themselves, who are the inhabitants of the land? I think you handled that when you answered that the Constitution gives rights to refugees, but the inhabitants, the citizens, have far more rights.
Absolutely, they do. I mean, it's very clear. A refugee cannot vote. That right they don't have. We have naturalization. For us, we are already citizens. Refugees cannot be naturalized. And of course, losing statehood it puts you in a totally different environment, because you're not entitled to anything apart from you, like the Uganda would call it a kubunda bunda, because you're just there and you don't have really the basic rights like access to citizenry, access to voting rights, access to, until you go back home. So our rights cannot be compared anywhere, comparable at what the refugees go through, in my view. Absolutely not.
Okay, now, Ambassador, as we come to the end of our conversation, let's talk about sustainable solutions. And in the event that we continue having reduction of funds and help coming in from development partners, what long-term solutions must we adopt as a country as far as the refugee crisis, receiving refugees and even taking care of them is concerned?
Absolutely. In my view, the solutions to these problems lie in two atmospheres. The first one is where these refugees are coming from. What are they running away from? It must be insecurity, it must be economic marginalization, it must be wars, it must be all sorts of things. So until we address, or countries where these people are coming from, address those very causes for the refugees to run away into other countries. So what I'm trying to say here is that those countries where the refugees are coming from must sort out their political questions.
Yes.
That's part of the solution. Otherwise, if they don't, then they will continue churning out refugees. And I've already talked about what President Yoweri Museveni and his administration did when they took over government in 1986. They made sure that the environment does not create, those avenues by which or through which people can run away from this country. In other words, stabilize the country, don't harass anybody, allow people to be free. Of course, the rest is history, and this administration has done that. So the other countries should also do the same. But on the other hand, if the refugees are so created, because the Bible is very clear, it is also full of wars. People have been fighting for so many years.
Yes, since time immemorial.
Absolutely, since time immemorial.
Yes.
There will be always fights. So we need to be prepared. Especially those people who cause these problems, because sometimes there are international dimensions that create these crises. I'm not going to name names,
and
but there are, because the two, I mean, the superpowers, for instance, have created an environment where in a country, one political side is supported by one superpower, and then the other is supported by the other one, and so the clash begins.
Yes.
So those are some of the things that have to be sorted, because if the international community can steer clear of causing these conflicts, then these problems will be sorted. Secondly, if the refugees, like it has already happened, or it has been happening for probably centuries and so on and so forth, that refugees are actually created as a result, then people, the international community must be prepared, because we are all members of the UN. The international community, all countries who are part of the UN, must be prepared to fund the refugee sector. If that funding is not there, then there will be more problems.
And it's also important to understand that there are man-made crises that have contributed to the refugee problem, but also we have natural disasters. We have landslides, we have famine in some countries, and because of that, sometimes people are going to move, and you're not going to close your doors to them because they've come looking for food. But the biggest contributor is always the man-made problem, which is usually the insecurity in the countries where the refugees come from. Now, as we close, I have another comment coming in, and he says, I take this opportunity to thank our ambassador for this awareness about the refugee policy in Uganda. But Ambassador Maiga, as a Ugandan, or as Ugandans, we are not complaining of hosting our brothers and sisters in our country. Actually, it is a godly act. My concern is big numbers and too much freedom. These people are so segregative. They strictly support each other. They are constructing houses. They have their own malls, schools, among others. Yet they are mushrooming each and every day. It's like we have the whole world here. Are we really safe? Ambassador, very briefly.
Absolutely, because there are always those sensibilities that look, these people are being looked after, especially by funding from the international community, and they will have schools, they will have hospitals, they will have settlements, which become satellite cities and all these kinds of things, and they become the envy of the rest of us who are nationals. That concern, yes, is well taken, but then what is the alternative? Because what is the alternative? Because these people have run away, and it's good that his first argument was that we are a God-fearing country, and therefore we should do, it's godly for us to look after these people. So you cannot drive them away. And secondly, if the situation stabilizes in their respective countries and they have already built houses here, probably they're going to sell them to us, and then we'll take them over, which will be an addition to our economy. And when you look at national economics, what they call national income, all of those constructions are part of our national income. Whether the houses have been constructed by refugees or not.
They're contributing
That's part of
to
the national income, because these houses have they don't have tires, so that they can be driven away. They will stay here even after these people have left.
It means these people won't leave. I mean, if you set up something permanent like a home, where are you going?
No, they have to.
Do we have a timeline, by the way, that after this period of time, people should be expected to go back home?
The timelines are extremely difficult. For instance, look at the problem of Nakivale. Is it Nakivale in western Uganda, where the Burundians and some Rwandese have been living for decades? And these predate even the 1960s. They've been living in those places. And therefore, putting a time limit is extremely difficult, unless the countries, the source, the countries where these people came from have stabilized fully, and there is no more conflict, political conflict, and sometimes
but
military conflict.
When you mention the Burundi and the Rwandans, there is insecurity in their countries now. There is peace for years now.
Absolutely, and that's what I'm talking about, that look, those places have to re-establish the peace. Because if they don't do that, then these people will continue to live in this country as refugees. And it will be a source of, insecurity, because they can organize and go back and fight. We have seen these things happen all over the place. And so it is in the interest of countries that have conflict to make sure that they establish peace, so that these people can go back home And instead of taking up armed conflict or arms to fight their respective governments, they can be resettled in their communities and then become bona fide citizens, peaceful citizens, people who can contribute to the development of their respective countries. And that's extremely important. And the example, people should copy or should learn from what Uganda has had under President Yoweri Museveni, because he stabilized the country, and instead of, because by the time before the NRM, President Yoweri Museveni took over government, we were churning out refugees. We have now become net recipients
of refugees. But were we churning them out to the tune of countries like South Sudan?
Well, I mean, people are coming from elsewhere. During President Yoweri Museveni, nationals are not running away. They are staying here because there is peace.
Okay.
And they have to learn from what President Yoweri Museveni has done for this country. Once you establish peace, it becomes extremely very simple to sort out some of these problems. Because we, as I said before at the beginning of this conversation, there were refugees, Ugandan refugees, in the DRC, in Congo by that time, Zaire, it was called Zaire. There were refugees in Sudan, but all these people were brought back. Absolutely.
Okay, and we will come to the end of this conversation. But Eno still says, Ambassador, to me, I see this as a trap bait in time to come, because every year we have them here. Thanks for the update, Mr. Ambassador, and good morning, Uganda. Well, thank you so much for your views and for being part of this conversation. We've been trying to understand Uganda's refugee policy, and I've been speaking to Ambassador Henry Maiga. Thank you so much, Ambassador. We are always grateful for your insights when you come over here. Well, Good Morning Uganda continues. We have sports updates coming your way, and after that we will have Good Morning Uganda Extra, which is an extension of Good Morning Uganda. So stick around, because we still have so much more for you.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda.
Pick of the day on UBC. Was brought to you by
I'll call you every day, yeah, yo, baby, don't know.
You can now get all the Chibuzi out with MTN voice bundles. Call all networks. Kubei Dondoro. Buy a 25-minute voice bundle for only 1,000. Or buy any daily voice bundle of your choice. Dial *100 *21# and select daily, or use the My MTN app. When we talk together, we are unstoppable.
In a nation hungry for truth, a world where every story matters, there exists a beacon of trust and reliability. For decades, they've been our voice and our window to the world, holding the mirror of our history. With 4 TV stations and 11 radio channels spanning 27 languages, they stand as guardians of information, defenders of truth. With Mascari Heritage Advantage, they uphold every citizen's right to reliable and free information. Their archive stories shaped our past and illuminate our present. Yet now, as new challenges arise and the world evolves, their mission faces its greatest test yet. Be part of our journey and let's navigate the unknown, uncover the untold, and safeguard our future together. Tune into your public broadcaster, for it is the intersection of trust and truth. Because to UBC, your story, every story, and every voice matters. UBC, inspiring Uganda.
Live from UBC Studios in Kampala, this is Good Morning Uganda.